disappear. I've seen that road before. It always leads me here. Lead me to your door.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Beatles on Uke with me, Matt Stead. In today's lesson we're going to learn a beautiful chord melody arrangement of Paul McCartney's The Long and Winding Road. Paul wrote The Long Winding Road in 1968. In fact, he wrote it the same day that he wrote Let It Be. Imagine that, two classic songs, both in one day. Paul McCartney once said he originally intended the song to become a standard and be sung by singers such as Tom Jones or Cilla Black. The genesis of the song is really interesting. It was recorded during the Get Back sessions, the sessions that eventually produced the album Let It Be and sadly led to the breakup of the Beatles. When it was recorded in 1969, the recording was only ever meant to be really a demo, and it just features Paul McCartney on piano and vocals and John Lennon on bass guitar. In fact, if you listen carefully to John's bass guitar, he makes loads of mistakes, kind of proof that really the recording was never meant for final release. Apparently Paul McCartney was livid when he heard it because it sounded nothing like he intended, and George Martin said the string arrangement was really mushy and not well produced at all. And it's such a shame really, because it's such a strong song, in fact one of my favourites from the later period. So what we're going to do is we're going to strip it back to its beautiful melody and lovely chords, and we're going to learn a gorgeous fingerstyle chord melody version. And without further ado, here's my arrangement in full. You can use this as a reference recording later on as you're learning it, but for now, let's just take a listen. Isn't that a gorgeous melody and really interesting chord choices? When you first take a look at the sheet music, it can be a little bit overwhelming with all these unusual, exotic sounding chords, A flats and E flats and B flats. But that's purely because I've kept this piece in its original key of E flat. And actually, when you analyse it, the chords are all diatonic. They're the natural chords that you would expect to come up in the key of E flat. Remember that every key is based on a scale that has 7 notes, and the key has 7 main chords in it. So the key of E flat major goes E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C and D. And in any key, the first, fourth and fifth chords are majors. So that's E flat major, A flat major and B flat major. And then the minor chords are the second chord, so that's F, the third chord G, and the sixth chord, which is C. And the D tends to be some kind of diminished, but that isn't used a lot in this song at all. Sometimes it's really useful to have a circle of fifths or one of these chord wheels. So you can see in the key of E flat that the major chords are E flat, A flat and B flat. And the minor chords down here, we've got F minor, G minor and C minor. And if you take a look at the song, it mostly consists of those chords, the ones that you would expect to come up in the key. I don't want to get too much into the theory of it here because we've got a lot to play, but if you really get into the nitty gritty of it, you'll spot some really common chord progressions that come from jazz music, such as 1-6-2-5 and 2-5-1. So the 1-6-2-5, you can spot that on the second line, for example, where we have E flat is the 1, C minor 7 is the 6, F minor 7 is the 2, and then B flat is being played as dominant chord, B flat 7, that's the 5. So 1-6-2-5. It's really nice to keep arrangements in the original key if you can. And with this one, the melody stays within one key. You'll notice there's not lots of sharps and flats written in the notation. And largely the melody falls on the A and the E string of our ukulele when we play it in this key perfectly. So another reason I've kept it in this key of E flat. So let's get down to it. Let's look at the fingerstyle methods used in my arrangement, and I'll take you through phrase by phrase through the entire score. In terms of the technique, we're going to use two main techniques in terms of playing the song. We're going to use our thumb to create rolls across the strings, landing on the melody note at any particular point, so we really hear the melody coming through as well as the chords. Later on, we'll try some Puma style picking, which helps with a couple of extra special sections later on. But for now, we're going to pick all of these notes and chords with our thumb. We want to be picking roughly where the body of the ukulele meets the neck, because that gives us that nice, sweet, dolce sound which we're after, particularly in this arrangement. I want you to keep your thumb almost, but not quite, at a right angle to the string, so it's not flat like this. When we strum down flat like this, we often get the strings caught underneath our nail and it can be really uncomfortable. Whereas if I just lift that arm up enough that I can drag the thumb over the strings neatly, it will work really, really beautifully. Remember, a nice 45-degree angle will really help with the fingering of these chords as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to play various shapes up and down the fretboard which will contain the melody notes. These are largely based on movable chord shapes. You'll also notice that most of the chords are played just on the C, E and the A strings. This keeps things a lot easier later on in the score when things get really, really complicated. So it's a purposeful decision to do that. So for instance, if we have a look at this opening phrase, we have a pickup note, a D, on the 5th fret of the A string. Then we go into what looks like a G minor shape. Now, remember, a G minor would look like this down here with this G minor shape. Well, if I take this G minor shape up, G minor, G sharp minor, A minor, A sharp minor, B minor, C minor. So what we're doing is we're using movable shapes up the fretboard to create all of the chords. I won't go into every single shape because it will take far too long, but notice we've got a G minor shape moved up, which becomes a C minor, which is the chord at that point in the song. So you see we have these movable shapes all through the song that we can take up and down, this one being a C minor. And notice that the melody note is also the last note that we hear when we strum this chord. And that's how this chord melody is going to work. The last note that we hear physically is going to be the melody note. Okay, so to start, first finger on this 5th fret and just pick it. Then we move into that G minor shape. Then we're going to play a D note, but so that we don't have to come out of that chord shape, rather than playing it here, we're going to play it up here on the 10th fret of the E string. That means we can keep this shape down as we hit it. And then we can drag the shape back for the G minor that follows. And then an A flat, we're just going to do a G shape, moved up 1 fret. You'll notice that because I went to town on this piece, there's lots of markings which alter the way we play this in terms of volume and dynamics. So right at the start we have an MF, that means mezzo forte, medium loud. So you can just pick this with your usual volume to start with. But notice that after we play the A flat chord, this one here, we have a decrescendo mark, that arrow that's getting narrower and narrower. So what I'm indicating there is that the next 2 chords we're going to hit really softly. And what I want you to do is just use the nails of your strumming hand, just to very lightly come down over the strings. That creates a really nice juxtaposition with the thumb picks. I'll show you what I mean. Notice they're just almost like a little echo or sigh in the background. So warm and loud, and then a little echo. So where you see those decrescendo marks, just think of them as very light down strums for now. The tied notes on the A flat are just there because the chord is spanning 2 measures. So it's just a musical way of saying that that chord is lasting into the next measure. So you only strum it once with your thumb, and then we're going to do our 2 light down strums. Okay, so those ties just indicating the length of the chord. You only hit it that once with the thumb, and then twice for the next 2 chords with your nails. The next bit's nice because we can stay in this chord, just drag your thumb down over the middle 2 strings and then hit the A string. Then we're going to change to an E flat shape. Again, another tied noted chord, just strum it once and then allow that to ring out. Okay. Then you'll notice that the next note has another one of those little arrows. So we're just going to very lightly touch the middle 2 strings with our nails. It doesn't matter if you strum a little bit more and you hit more strings. It just means that we're just going to very lightly touch the ukulele strings. So that will look and sound something like this. Again, see, it's almost like a breath or an echo in the background. Then we go to an E flat chord being played using a bar like so. Any finger that feels comfortable. I like to use my 3rd finger for this note here. You could use your 2nd finger. And then we resolve it to that A flat chord shape again once more. Okay. So if I put that all together, I'll go right from the start and we'll do the whole of that opening line apart from the last 3 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's our opening phrase. Really pretty, isn't it? Of course, I've been working on this arrangement for weeks, so it feels relatively natural to me. But if you're just starting out on this arrangement, slow that tempo down, and you can go as slow as you like. You could even take 1 note at a time. Just to get the general shapes. Take it really nice and slow. The next bit we have some really nice harmonised notes. That just means 2 notes that harmonise nicely together. And this just represents that lovely bass line Da, da, da. So we start by playing out of the shape from the chord we've just played, the A flat. Just hit the middle two strings. Then just move a finger back, or you can use this one for the middle two strings. And then just hit the top two strings physically, G and C. And then finally off for the C at the start of the next line. Notice we've got a crescendo mark there, so we're getting progressively louder as we do these. Don't have to go crazy loud, but just start kind of quietish. And then just build up a little volume as you go. If you want to be really pedantic, I've put a little vibrato marking on that last two notes of the first line. So you can just wobble ever so slightly on this note if you want to. Remember, for vibrato, it helps if you take your thumb off the back. The wobble comes from the elbow, and imagine that this finger has grown roots into the fretboard. It's not going to move left and right, it's just going to wobble. And off. Fantastic. Measure 6 is quite typical of this whole arrangement in that when you look at it, it looks really tricky with fingerings and chord names and whatnot. But if you play out of chord shapes, it's not too bad. Let me show you. So we hit that open C at the start. And the first chord is just another one of those A flats, which is just a G moved up. That makes sense if you think about it, doesn't it? G, G sharp or A flat. And we just strum down. Keep that shape there and just take your little finger to 5 and 6. Then we come back to this E flat shape down here, just a normal E flat shape, and we strum the bottom 3 strings physically, and then just touch the E string for this G note here. Now the next chord, it's tempted to flatten down like this, and you can do that's absolutely fine, like so. Or if you prefer, you can just add your little finger to the E flat chord. Watch this. Like so, which is really easy and simple. And then after that, we just play almost like an arpeggio down the chord. You can literally just drag your thumb down. Again, notice we've got a decrescendo mark, so we're going to still use our thumb here because they're individual notes rather than a chord, but we're going to get progressively lighter. So the last one you barely hear. And if you like, you can also just give that one a little wobble. You can't really do the whole thumb off the back vibrato on this one because we've still got the chord down, but just a slight wobble. Doesn't make too much difference really, to be honest. So I'll put that phrase together really slowly. It will look and sound like this. 3, 4. Isn't that lovely? Next up, we go to a series of partial chords. These have to be this way just so that we can finger the melody and for it to work. So don't sweat the theory too much, but let's take a look at the shapes again. So those 2, 4, 3 marks, you can keep that shape down that you're doing for A flat. Technically what we're doing is an F minor 7 chord, believe it or not. Crazy, right? And we've added this melody note here. But to make things easier, I just play the middle 2 strings, which means we only need these 2 here. So going back to something that feels comfortable, I tend to just keep this shape down. Then we go back to this shape, which looks like a G minor 7. It comes from a B flat chord, but we're not playing the G string, so we hold it down like this. Then just use either your little finger or your ring finger to hit that C note that follows. And then an unusual chord shape, this next one. You can do a bar and add your finger here, or you can use 2 fingers like this. And we've got this really unusual E flat 7 with a sus4 note. Again, don't sweat the theory too much. You can either do it like this or like this. Either's absolutely fine. And then finally, we've got this little flurry that I've added, which is really sweet. We're going to do a pull off from 3 to 1. So you only pick it once with your picking hand, but you hear 2 notes. Because it's such a fast one, you don't need to kind of really grab at the string like we do sometimes with a pull off. Just pick the note and allow the finger to move up to this E flat note at the top here. Then we go to a mini bar at the 1st fret, and then just finish it off with another of those E flat notes. I'll do that really slowly up close. That will look like this. Slower still. Okay. If you find it helps, you can leave that first finger down for the pull off. Notice a little decrescendo, so we're getting quieter as we go as well. Now we're really getting into the score. I just want to take just a moment just to talk about the timing and the note lengths here. It can be really difficult in this arrangement to follow the note lengths, counting quavers and crotchets and dotted notes. And those tied notes that go across the measures make it particularly difficult. Paul McCartney was really guilty of singing across measures a lot. It's a really great technique, but it makes it really hard to count sometimes. So rather than counting 1 and 2 and 3 and etc., what I like to do is just follow the rhythm of the lyrics themselves. I'll show you what I mean. So what I'll do is first I'll listen to the song just to make sure I know it really well, and then I'll often have the lyrics in front of me as I'm playing through or working on an arrangement. So for instance, if I sing the part we've been working on from measure 6, that will sound something like this. It always leads me here, lead me to your door. See how that gives me the timing and the rhythm. Notice also that those decrescendo parts that I added in, the bits that aren't part of the melody, they tend to be specifically those decrescendoed ones. So have a listen. It always leads me here, and then here. Just a bit in between. Lead me to your door, here. So get a real feel for which parts of the melody and which parts of the embellishment, and really sing it through as you play it. Now that's probably the hardest part of the verse, so measures 10 and 11 into the repeat are a little bit easier. And really, again, it's just about playing out of shapes. So measure 10, we can do this G shape for the A flat like before. We actually take it up to 5 and 6 for the E flat chord. Add the note. Then we come back to a normal E flat shape, and we can do the trick we used earlier, just introducing that little finger to finish off the C minor 7 chord. So if I do 10 and 11 again, that will look like this. Okay, again we've got another light chord here at the end. I just do a nail brush. Then we go back into this shape here, hit it once more, G7 shape at 4 and 5 for this B flat 7 chord, and then little finger on 6, partial bar across 3. I won't go into every single one, but you might be wondering why these weird chord shapes are coming up, like a G7 at 4 and 5 for B flat. The reason is it's just a movable chord. We've taken a G7 chord. If we move it up, it becomes an A flat 7 or a G sharp 7. If we move that up again, A7. If we move it up one more time, B flat 7. So we've just taken a G7 chord up the fretboard. Measure 13, we've got that number 1 repeat. So what does that mean? We go back to the start and we do the whole thing again. Notice at the end of measure 13, we play that D note, the 5th fret of the A string. So we don't need to repeat it when we go back to the start. We start from the C minor chord after that. So let's hit that high D note. And then we'll go back to the start and we'll do the whole of the repeated first section. I'll go really slow. You can either use this to listen and look at the shapes that I'm using if you're not ready, or if you feel confident enough, you can even use this as a playthrough. But don't worry if you're not ready there quite yet. So here we go. 3, 4. second line. Now at this point, rather than playing the first repeat, we're actually going to strum this chord one more time and do the second repeat. Now this is where we're going to change technique slightly. So instead of using our thumb to drag down over the next bit, we're going to go Puma style and we're going to bring our fingers up like so. Puma comes from Spanish classical guitar. P, pulgar in Spanish meaning thumb. Indies, medio, annular. It basically means we're going to associate a finger with a string. So after we've done that down strum on that E flat chord, we can keep that shape down and we can just pinch the outside two strings and then touch the C string with your index finger, and we do that 3 times. Okay, like this. The next section is what is most commonly called the bridge, or the Beatles often. The next section is what we often commonly call the bridge, or the Beatles often refer to it as middle 8. That's the many times I've been alone, many times I've cried. So a little bit faster here in terms of note lengths. Now you can tackle this 2 different ways. You can either stay with the Puma picking, I'll show you in just a second, or you can go back to your thumb. Either is absolutely fine. Let me show you the 2 options. With the Puma picking, you're going to keep the shape down we're using before, and you'll just use your first 3 fingers to pinch the chords like so. Now if you can, I like to do a little roll here on the first one where my first finger, second finger and third finger roll very quickly. Almost like a very fast forward arpeggio. Or you could just pinch, just make sure you're really digging in on the A string. Then just touch down on this 5th fret, move your bar right up here to the 8th fret. You could just keep the similar shape bar down. Little finger up here for the 11th fret here, so we can stay within that shape. And then middle 2 strings like so. So that will look and sound something like this. Now if you prefer, you can use your thumb just like you were in the original section. I think both of those sound nice, so whichever you prefer, whichever feels most comfortable. Next up, we drag that bar back to the 3rd fret now. Reach up with your little finger to the 6th fret. Then we've got 2 chords, an unusual F minor 7 without the C, like so. And then just move that finger back to the B flat 7. I like to thumb drag on the F minor 7. And then a nice light nail strum down on the B flat 7, because that gives us that nice decrescendo that we've got there. We're slowing as we hit that as well. So normal tempo, it would be kind of, but we really drag it out, which sounds lovely. So let me do the whole of that section really, really slowly from measure 15. That will sound like this. Notice it's not too bad because we're keeping in these shapes. We've got a bar and we're hitting a note up here. Then we go way up to the 8th, we're hitting a note up here. And then we go back to that 3rd fret and we're hitting a note here. So it's not too bad as long as you keep those shapes down. The next section, we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're back to tempo, so normal tempo, but let's take it nice and slow as we're learning it. And forte means we're going to strike these a little bit harder now than we have been for the rest of it. So exactly the same as before. again we slow, and a nice nail brush at the end. Fantastic. So you'll notice that this arrangement's quite epic. It's quite long, isn't it, with that repeat, and we've got a whole other page to go yet. But just to kind of reassure you, the whole of the next half of the page, in fact, pretty much right down to measure 27, is just a repeat of what we've done with one exception. So we'll go back to the technique that we used in the first page, and we'll use similar chords and progressions. I'll show you. So the start of the next section's exactly the same as the start of the song, only instead of starting with a high D note, we hit a B flat at the first fret. This is the last note of measure 18. But then we're back to what we did at the start. We've got this G minor shape up here, reach up to 10, back to normal G minor shape, G shape at 3 and 4 for A flat, brush, hit it again. And then here, just for a bit of variety, I've added a little pull off 3 to 1. Okay. Now, in terms of the fingering of this one, I find it helps to use my third finger to first for this 3-1. And then my third finger comes down for this G note here on the E string. That allows me to put this one down here for this partial E flat chord. And then I can either use my little finger here like so for the next bit, or I can come out of this and do a bar like so. So if I go from the pull off, that will sound and look something like this. And then we resolve it to another one of those A flats. Okay. Let's keep going. So from measure 22, we have that lovely little run again. And then just as before, we go up to the A flat shape, 5-6, normal E flat, use these 3 fingers for the C minor 7, and lightly go through the notes. Then we go to the last measure of that line. Again, we're using this G shape, even though it's a different chord. B flat 7, and that unusually flat 7 sus4 shape. And again, we can do exactly the same as before. That lovely little run there, which is gorgeous on measure 26. The next section is where things change. We've got kind of a refrain here, but we're still going to use familiar chord shapes as we go up and down. So starting from measure 27, we keep our A flat, our G shape here at the 3rd and 4th. And then when I go up to this E flat up the fretboard, what I tend to do is I put this shape down. It almost looks like a G minor 7. And then I put my 3rd finger here on the 8th fret. The reason being that when I take away this finger, it gives me the 6th fret here. My finger's in the right place. Like so. So start of that measure, 27, will sound like this. And then that shape. And then we bar the 3rd fret, finger on the 5th, little finger up to 6th, and back. And we can just gradually get quieter on the chords that follow. Let me do that little section from measure 27 really slowly so you can hear it. And to finish off, we go back to this shape one more time. G7 shape like before. Little finger on 6th. And we're going to go back to this strum with this shape. And then some picks, which is really, really lovely. When you get to measure 30, remember to revert to Puma style where we pick it so that we can pinch 2 notes at the same time. It gives a really nice juxtaposition to the passage before. So again, from measure 27, thumb here, thumb again, and then Puma. get that nice kind of light, sharper sound just for that one measure, which is really nice. Then, believe it or not, we've got one more final section to learn, and it's probably my favourite. I love the way the notes just build up gradually. It's really, really beautiful, this rising, swirling melody. And then we get the introduction of some chords, which is really nice as well. You can either use your Puma style picking or thumb picking for this one, but the key thing is to kind of get your brain around what's happening in terms of the notes. The weaving notes really confused me when I was working this out, and it took me a while to arrange this next part. The best thing to do is to think about it as patterns. So we have a note at the start, this B flat, and then notice that we always go to this 2 and 3 up here on the C string for a D and E flat. And then we go back to the original note. So think of that as a pattern. Original note, 2, 3, original note. Then we go up to the 3rd fret. So you can use any fingers for this. I like to use my 3rd. And we do the same thing. 3, but we still have 2, 3. And we go back to our original note. We do the same thing on 5. 2, 3. Original note. Okay. If I put that together, so note, 2, 3, note, new note, 2, 3, new note. Isn't that lovely? And it's kind of a simple pattern once you get used to it. When we get to the 6th fret up here, which is this high E flat, the pattern changes slightly in that the notes go back to the 4th fret of the E string for an A flat here, and then a C here, 3rd fret of the A string, and then up to 6. So the last little quadruplet, if you like, all the 4 8th notes will sound like this. So if we put that together in slow motion, notice the P for pianissimo, so nice and quiet at the start here. 3, 3, 5, 5, 6, and then those new notes. Okay, so you can practice that really slowly, thinking of the pattern. It's really beautiful, isn't it? It really, I find it quite emotional, this section. And then when you've got it, you can speed it up, but really take your time to learn the patterns first. Then the next 4 measures, what I've done is I've introduced chords so it has a feel of building even further, but the same patterns remain. So we have an E flat chord, and notice we're still hitting these same 2 notes. So the only thing that's changed is we're putting a chord on the first note. Then this A flat, you'll be getting used to this now, G shape. Then this almost like an E minor shape at 5, 6, 7. Then we go to this shape up here at 6 and 8. I think about it as like an E flat shape that's been moved up. Back to 4 down here on the E string. Try striking 2 strings at once here, 4 and 3. And then to the 6, one last time. Okay. If I put that together slowly, just those 4 measures, that will sound like this. What you want to do is just practice that through crazy slow, really painfully slow until you get the rhythm and the timing right, and then speed it up. And you can put it together with the section before. So just notes, remember. And then the chords. Notice we're getting slightly louder as we go. That's basically it. That's almost everything we need to play this song now. But I'll keep talking you through the page because notice we've got some directional markers here. So at the end of measure 34, you'll notice a little note where it says DS al coda. That stands for Da Segna al coda. It means we go back to the segna mark, which is that weird, kind of looks like a percentage with an S in it. We go back to that mark, then we play down to where it's written to coda, and you'll notice that's at the start of measure 30. You could think of it really rather as the end of measure 29 would be better. And at that point we jump to the coda, which is literally the last 3 measures of the piece. So just to clarify, at the end of measure 34 we jump right back to measure 19. We play through to the end of measure 29, and then there we jump to the coda, which is the last 3 measures, the outro, if you like. Originally, when I wrote out my arrangement without any of these repeats or jumping about markers, the whole piece was 5 or 6 pages, which is just way too inconvenient in terms of skipping on an iPad or using sheet music. It just wouldn't fit. So that's why a lot of arrangers use these repeat markers to repeat sections to make the score a lot more accessible, i.e. 2 pages rather than 6. So at the end of measure 34, we hit the 6th fret of the A string. And then we do measure 19 again. It's like the opening, isn't it? I'll keep going. We keep going. That new section we're just in. And then measure 29 goes right to measure 35 at the end, the outro. Let's have a quick look at that outro just so we can get it under our fingers. So just a series of chords just to finish off. We start with an E flat, but this is a different shape again. Remember, we can play these chords all over the fretboard, and sometimes we have to add these extra notes in as well. So we end up with what looks like a G minor 7 chord, basically moved up to 6 and 7 like so. Then we're on the same few frets, but we change to this, almost like an E minor shape. Back to a traditional E flat and open, just the middle 2 strings. And then our last A flat, you've been playing those all through the song. Just hit this note here, this E flat. Switch to, almost looks like the E flat shape again, slightly different, 3 and 1 on the middle 2 strings. Little finger comes down. And then just strum the top 3 strings really quietly. Notice we've got a decrescendo for the whole of that bit, so we're getting quieter and quieter as we go. Little bit of a shake on the last one for a little bit of vibrato. And also we've got a ritardando, which means we're going to slow down on the last 2 measures. So we're going to go quieter and quieter. And we're going to slow down. Isn't that a lovely way to kind of ease out of the song and just close what is a beautiful, beautiful melody? Just remember, this is a challenging piece, so you might need weeks or months to work on this to get it up to tempo and sounding really nice. Break it down into small chunks or phrases, work on those and piece it together slowly, a section at a time. Again, really slow tempo as you get used to the song. And then when you've worked it all through, just gradually increase that tempo just a little bit each day. And most of all, really enjoy this. It's such a beautiful melody. And as I said in my opening, it's such a shame in some ways that the final produced song isn't so great. I often listen to the version on Let It Be Naked, where they took away a lot of the Phil Spector additions, and it sounds a little bit nicer, but it still has those dodgy bass notes on. But now you have a beautiful ukulele fingerstyle version that you can play and enjoy forever. And I will see you in the next video. There'll be many more of these arrangements to come on the Beatles on Loop course, plus some really simple strumming versions as well. Take care everyone, much love, and you con.